When lighting is done well, it can grab the viewer's attention and get more people looking at it and generally improve upon all of the hard work that you've put into it. But when it's done poorly, the exact opposite happens. It turns people off and ruins any of the work that you may have put into it. Bottom line is, lighting is vitally important. And nowadays, I see too many artists that are producing really, really wonderful looking models, but then ruining them with lackluster lighting. So in this video, you're going to learn how to light your model in the best way possible. We're going to start with the 5 vital questions you need to ask yourself before you begin lighting something. And then some simple techniques to improve upon the lighting and obviously your render. And the reasons why you do these things, not just rules, which I think is incredibly important, because then once you know the reasons why you would use, say, a fill lamp or versus a kick lamp or whatever they want to call it, then in the future when you've got your own thing and your own different story or whatever it is you're trying to tell, you know exactly why you would use certain things. And then to top it off, we'll finish with a live demonstration on how you can do this with your own model. Sound good? Yay! All right, let's kick it off with the most important thing to remember. And that is that lighting doesn't stand by itself. It basically stands upon the story and the composition. And ideally, like everything, the modeling, the texturing should all be in harmony with each other. This is often why, you can sometimes find a movie that has produced, it's got a large team of like 70 people. One person's done the modeling, one person's done the texturing, and another team's done the lighting, etc. And it can kind of look a little iffy at the end. And that's generally because, there's a breakdown in the team management, but not everybody was on the same page. And you can often end up with that yourself. Like if you start out with a model, like let's say you made a car, and you're like, oh, I'm going to make this like a Mad Max grungy sort of style. And then you finish modeling the car, and then you get inspired by something you see online, and you go, oh, I'm going to put it in a studio environment. And I'm going to light it with this light, when that light was really only applicable to like a polished Ferrari to make it look sleek and smooth. And now you've got this grungy Mad Max vehicle, and it doesn't make any sense. So the story doesn't match the lighting or the composition or anything like that. It's like you've started with 2 different ends of it. So, ideally you should be asking these sorts of questions at the start. What is it that you're actually trying to create? But even if you've just got a model now and now you want to know how to light it, you can do that as well. But just to point this out, the story, the composition, the lighting, they really do all play a big part together. And by the way, if you haven't watched my composition tutorial already, you can go ahead and watch that now by clicking on this big orange circle. It's only about half an hour long, but you will learn a lot. And you should watch that first. So go ahead, click that, watch it first, and then come back to this one. All right, so these are the 5 questions to ask before you light something. Essentially, this is the story part. So first things first, what is the point of this render? Like, why should it exist? Why is it actually out there? I find myself asking this question a lot when I look at some renders online, and I'm completely guilty of that myself. Often as artists, we're kind of impulsive sometimes, like, oh, I really want to make this grenade. I really want to make this thing that you got inspired by in the middle of the night or something like that. And you model this weird thing and you spend ages on it. And you never really stop to ask yourself, like, what is the point of this thing? Like, why am I making this? Am I making this for me, or am I making this for other people? You post it online, and often you end up with a mix of ideas of things you added as a last-ditch effort. But what is the real point of it? And by the way, if the point of it is like, I just want to make something that's cool, that's a point. Okay, but that will help you to guide it. And as long as you've got that point at the start, I want to make something cool, that's a point. Okay, now you've got that. Is there a story? If so, in what order should the viewer read the image? So this is why I said it's important to understand the composition first, because the composition is a big part of this. What the viewer looks at when they first open an image is really all composition. And it's, the focal element, like the brightest thing or the most bizarre contrasted element in an image is what you're most drawn to. So then what should they, how should they read the image? So for example, a story, let's say you had a character who's holding a gun. Okay, but the story is he's a mafia hit man or something like that, and he's holding a gun and pointing it towards the camera. Well, if you wanted to make that character mysterious, like he's a mysterious hitman, it wouldn't make sense to throw the light on his face because he has to look mysterious. You should be putting the light on the gun and his arm and leave the face in shadow. Okay, just as an example, like this is why it's important to figure out the story before you start adding lights into it. What should the viewer be focused on? That's essentially it. It's the composition of it in relation to the story. What emotion or mood do you want the viewer to feel? So we'll get into different aspects that can affect the emotional mood. For some reason, I have trouble saying that word, mood. We'll get into that later. And then finally, and this is where you get into the experimentation style of lighting. But what lighting styles could have the most impact or appeal to suit those 4 answers? So just for fun, just to help you out, here are my 4 answers for an example. Okay, what's the point of this render? I want to make this jerry can model look sexy. Okay, fair enough. You've modeled a jerry can. Is there a story? What order should the viewer read the image? Okay, somebody broke down a field and they went to go get gas and they left this jerry can there. Okay, that's the setting. What should the viewer be focused on? The jerry can, obviously, but specifically the grungy texture detail. So these are, by the way, these are answers that you might have filled out for yourself, okay? What emotion or mood do you want the viewer to feel? Interest. That's an emotion. Like that's a style. Like that can be as simple as it gets. But interest. So you want to grab the viewer's attention. And then finally, what lighting styles could have the most impact or appeal to suit this? That's where you start experimenting. So that's the example. Okay, that was from my Rust tutorial, which if you want to watch it, you can click the jerry can. I'll have to try and remember to add these annotations later. All right, now let's talk about some simple techniques to improve your lighting. So what I'm about to show you is basically a distilled version of all of the lighting tips and advice that you find in various books. So I read basically a bunch of, photography lighting books for lighting people, lighting nature environments and things like that, as well as some 3D lighting books. And I took the stuff that actually matters, got rid of all the padding and the stuff that's specifically to do with photography, for example, and I've just tried to find the stuff that matters. Like I wrote notes as I was reading these things, and so here it is in a simple to understand format. Hopefully I can explain it simply. Okay. There is such a thing as short lighting and broad lighting. Now, generally this is in relation to a human character, something with a face, but it also applies to basically any three-dimensional model. And what it means is where the light is falling in relation to the face. So short lighting is when the light is falling on the side of the face which is facing away from the camera. Broad lighting is when it's falling on the side of the face that is facing towards the camera. So even if, this is a character obviously, but even if it was a cube, you could imagine that there is going to be a short side of the cube, like that side there, and then a bigger side over here. So, it relates to models as well, not just characters. Essentially, the short side of things, like there is more shadow. Okay, so it makes the model appear more three-dimensional because you're getting a greater amount of fall off. So you're getting a larger range of values from where the light is hitting and it's rolling across the body and the rest of the model. And so you're getting a greater understanding for what it is that is actually making up the model, the depth and the volume and all that kind of thing. But because of that, it also appears slimmer because more of it is in shadow than is in light. So generally, like in real photography, if you're photographing people, they say you should never photograph women with broad lighting, with the light hitting the major side of their face, because it makes them appear big, like fuller. And that is very undesirable for a woman, I guess, right? Nobody would actually want that. Men do. So it makes men appear full. So if you're doing a bodybuilder render, as an example, you got some Hulk character, it makes sense to use this broad one. But if you're making, and this doesn't just apply like, okay, so girls have to be short and then men have to be broad. No, it also This is why we talked about the story. It relates to the story. Like, how do you want the character to look on your screen? Do you want it to take up a lot of visual weight and presence in the image? Maybe broad actually suits that. If you want it to sort of, I don't know, it can have, the short style can also have some interest. It can also make it feel, like I said, slimmer. But anyway, the broad one like I said, it can make it appear bigger, have more visual weight, but it can also have the maybe undesirable effect of appearing slightly flat. So again, maybe that's suitable for a certain character, but just be aware of it as well. Okay. If this character was facing dead on towards the camera, the short and the broad, you might not be able to find one, but in a lot of cases, the model is at some sort of angle to the camera, so you can sort of figure out the way to position it. Okay, now let's talk about rim lights. Now, a lot of books talk about rim lights, the 3-point lighting, and honestly, rim lights look great, and a lot of artists use them. But there are cases where it doesn't actually make sense to use a rim light, specifically if you're going for sort of a natural feel where, like, I don't know, say for example, you've got a render of a cat which is walking into a kitchen and it's kind of sheepish, like maybe it's heard a noise and it's entering into a space and it's walking into the light. It doesn't make sense to use a rim light, because a rim light, the purpose of a rim light is to pull the character, the model, off of the background, because it looks weird. Like the one on the left here, if you're trying to show off your model, it wouldn't make sense to have this one on the left there. But I do see a lot of artists that produce renders like that, and I've done it myself. So no shame there. If you're trying to show off a model to put in your portfolio, you want to make sure it's well lit. Again, this goes back to your story. Why are you actually making this thing? So in that case, you would want to use a rim light. But again, some story examples, and we'll take a look at some better examples later on, you would not use a rim light. But there you go. Rim lights primarily to separate, to pull the model away from what is in the background and to help show it off a little bit better. This one's fairly simple. The position of the light, whether it's above the model or under the model. Very, very simple concept to grasp. I'm sure everybody sat around a campfire and had somebody tell a story with the torch held under their face. No, I don't know how common that is, but it appears common in movies anyway. But yeah, essentially the reason why lighting that's like a model that's lit underneath, the reason why it looks odd is supposedly because we are born and raised on Earth and we have one sun in our solar system. We favor strong lighting from above. Lighting that is coming from underneath just feels wrong. It feels bizarre to us. It does not look natural. I'm not sure why that is. You could go into a whole bunch of history perhaps to figure out why that all is, but it's just the way it is. So they actually say if we were raised on a planet that had 2 suns or more suns, we would probably favor lighting that had 2 strong key sources of light. But we're raised on Earth, we have 1. So that's generally, essentially lighting that comes from above the model just looks natural, just feels right to us. But lighting that comes underneath the model can look odd. So not just scary, like there are times when it makes sense to position it from underneath it. Like if you're going for a surreal, something stylized, something, especially if it's like not a real human character, like this one here, like the robot, you could throw light from underneath the robot up at it, and it wouldn't look particularly odd. It would probably suit it because this is a weird thing. It's a sci-fi robot. It doesn't exist. We're not used to it. So you could get away with underlighting. So this is why, it helps to know the reasons why to use certain lighting. So it's not like I'm saying never ever use lighting from underneath it. No, seriously, you should experiment with that. It might look better. But just know, when and why not. This one is fun. I like to talk about this. Soft and harsh or hard lighting. Soft lighting is, and what I'm talking about here is the size of the shadow. So in Blender, we have, if you select a lamp, you'll see a size value. And if you're new to Blender, you've probably fiddled with it and gone like, oh, this makes no difference whatsoever. What it's actually doing is changing the harshness of the shadow. The lower the value, the sharper the shadows. So in these 2 examples on your screen here, the one on the left, these are both lit with a sun lamp at exactly the same direction. Like I have not rotated the sun lamp between them at all. They are in the exact same spot. The only thing I changed was that size value. The one on the left here has a 0.5 shadow size. The one on the right here has a 0.01 shadow size. So you can see the difference that it makes. Soft shadows generally washes out smaller amounts of detail, and it appears flatter and smoother. Harsh shadows, it really picks up the detail. It gets into the tiny little crevices of your model, and it brings it out there and produces a shadow in it. Because essentially without shadow, we have no way of understanding a model. That's why we need shadow. Like there's a great book in something of shadows. In Praise of Shadows. Woo! Glad I got it. This old racist Japanese book written before World War II. But it's a great book that talks about like how we fear shadows, and like we're always trying to hide it, but you need it to bring out the light, to bring out the parts you like. Anyways, it's sort of, I don't know, philosophical sort of book, but but generally shadow is not something you need to hide all the time. You need shadow in order for the viewer to understand it. So on the right hand side here, without that shadow, we would not know what this snow actually looks like. It would look more like the one on the left here. So anyways, that's the difference. The soft shadow does have a use. It's better for forms, better for making a flowy, vague sort of figure, like the shape of a body car or the shape of a female, right? Let's talk about females, the bodies. Hey. I don't know what I'm talking about. So, and because of the way, I don't know, just the way we are, like sharp angles are generally seen as more masculine, like boxy, sharp things, and then smooth, flowy angles are seen as more feminine. So generally, soft sort of feels a little bit more feminine, and harsh sort of feels a little more aggressive. But that's not to say that you should use only harsh for males and only soft for females. I honestly think if you're making a human character, you should only use soft, but we can get to that in a second. And the one thing to note with harsh shadow lighting is that you really have to be particular in the way that you place the lighting. It's deliberate. So if you make a mistake in the angle of the lighting, it's much more exaggerated in the harsh shadows. Whereas soft lighting, you can really get away with a vague placement, like just place it somewhere over the shoulder of this guy and it'll be fine. Like it'll light him pretty well. But harsh, you kind of have to note it. It's a small thing, but just to be aware of it, I guess. As an example though, because I don't want people coming away from this great, this comparison and going like, oh, the one on the right is so much better. Like that's great. I should always be using harsh shadows. No. There is many examples where soft lighting makes sense. Humans, you should really always only ever be lighting with soft light. The reason for that, and for general, like this is, like when I was researching for the Architecture Academy, like how to do interior lighting, they say one of the biggest sins that they make for interior lighting nowadays is so many people are putting downlights over their couches. And the reason you don't want to do that is that a downlight, like a halogen downlight, produces harsh shadows. It's a small light point, so it produces harsh shadows. And what that does is it highlights and brings out all of the tiny crevices and shadows in people's eyes, in their wrinkles. It makes you look 10 years older. It's awful. So you shouldn't have harsh lighting anywhere where people are going to be. And so people put it over their couch. It doesn't make any sense for you to do that. The best lighting, the one that's actually most important for interior lighting, they were just talking about houses here for a second, is something that nobody has, and that's ambient lighting. And this is something that you can find in a lot of modern rich houses nowadays. It's like an alcove that's built into the ceiling, this huge, large surface that light is shone into, and it bounces around in there and creates this large, smooth, soft shadows over everything. And everybody looks young. So if you want to, they say like the best place for it is the bedroom. And there's a joke, it said like, as a lighting designer, if you can make your clients look good in the bedroom, you'll have a customer for years. Anyways, small thing. But what I wanted to say is, for characters, you should always use smooth. Like, unless you wanted to make... The only thing I can kind of imagine where you wouldn't want that is if you deliberately made an old, wrinkly guy and you wanted to make him look bitter and extremely old. Go ahead and use that harsh shadows to bring that out. But generally, stick with smooth for people. let's talk about color. Color for lighting. So we've got two comparisons here, natural lighting on the left and exotic colors. So by natural lighting, I'm talking about white as well as anything that you can typically find from nature. So by that, I mean like the warm yellows of the sun, as well as some slightly blue tints that you can get from the sky. Essentially, if you look at a black body temperature graph, anything that falls within that, I would call natural lighting. Exotic lighting is stuff that you really can't produce easily. Like it's artificial lighting. So this is stuff that, because we're not used to it, and especially like, I mean, even in the last 50 years, like lighting technology has improved so much that you can now get crazy amounts of colors that you previously could not produce. Like everything was incandescent bulbs. And if you wanted to like make a blue light bulb, you had to like get a really bright, it was still like this orangey incandescent bulb, but you're putting this film over the top of it, which is making it darker but slightly blue. And it was just, it didn't quite work. But nowadays we've got all sorts of cool new lighting technology. And now you can do, some really, really interesting things with it. So we're not used to these exotic colors yet, like purples, blues, greens, things like that just seem a little bit odd to us. But they each have their pros and cons. So exotic lighting, because it's so new, it can often make it look stylized and also heavily emotional and grab our interest very quickly as well, because it's so weird and bizarre. And also I would add a small note there, it can also suit the environment as well. Specifically urban or sci-fi scenes. You can get away with some really vibranty pinks and purples and things, and it just suits it. Natural lighting, on the other hand, feels comfortable, traditional, and it can often make the character look more realistic, because it's not this stylized, funky sort of thing that exotic lighting would have on it. It feels like, everyday life. It feels natural. So again, going back to the start, what is the point of your image? If you're trying to make something that feels like this aesthetically beautiful face and photorealistic, you wouldn't use some crazy exotic lighting. You would stick with something that's natural. On the other hand, and by the way, these two examples here, the actual image is the one on the right there. What I did was I took this one by Julian, who let me use his artwork here. But I took it into Photoshop and I just bleached the colors and I tried to make it look as though it was just standard skin tone. But the one on the right is his original. Just this horribleness on the left is my fault. But you can see the difference in between them. The one on the left, like in this example, it doesn't really suit. Like it's a character that's sort of suspended in midair in this odd sort of pose. It makes far more sense to have this one on the right with these exotic colors, this weird, surreal sort of feeling to it. So again, it's what is the reason for it? Okay, here's a quick example. And I'm throwing this one in here because this one is actually still fairly traditional light source. Because those are two colors, the blue and the orange are two colors that you can actually find in nature. Blue from the sky and from night, essentially, and yellow, orangey colors you can get from fire. So those are actually two fairly comfortable colors, and I'm not sure why. In fact, I actually asked this on Twitter because I was puzzled by it. But for some reason, if you want to make an appealing looking color scheme for lighting, stick with those two colors. Orange and blue just look killer every single time that they're used. It just looks beautiful, like captivating. And I asked people on Twitter, like, does anybody actually know why that is? There was a few theories, like people said, like, it's what we're used to, sitting in caves, and we looked outside and it was blue. Other people said that it's just a complementary color scheme, so it works. Some people had a little fight over what the answer was. I still don't know, but it just rocks. It's just an awesome color scheme. So if you want to play it safe, you can stick with that, like cheat, and it'll just always look amazing. Here's some more exotic examples. So this is the character Victor from Cosmos Laundromat. You can see like this green here. Like, how weird is that? Like, we don't see green ever. Except, I don't know, maybe if you're in a forest that was brightly lit and the sun was shining through the leaves. But you just don't see this hue and saturation. So it feels surreal to us. It's odd that we would see that kind of color lighting a person. One on the left here is very heavily emotional. Like blue sort of feels like a sad color for some reason. I don't quite understand the reasons for this. There is a video which I'll link to in a second that you might want to watch. But again, it's very emotional, very moody. And then on the right here, this is an interesting twist. It's got like some red, some green, some blue. This is where I think this sort of lighting scheme would suit a character for an urban environment. So if you've just you've modeled let's say like a sci-fi guy and he's in like this robotic sort of suit and he's posing, it would actually make sense to use a lighting style like this because it's urban. It's like in this world where maybe they've got these crazy colors on the streets. Like this sort of lighting would suit like the street of Tokyo, you know what I mean? So having lighting like that can imply that the environment is something. So yeah, if he was just like, even just by itself like this, you can sort of imagine like what sort of scene would make that lighting? Oh, a street, an urban environment. And you just subconsciously assume that he's part of that environment. The second one here, by the way, doesn't really fit. I guess maybe that's like traditional light, like sunlight, but it's got some blind effect over it as well. But anyways, some examples there for you. By the way, click this button right here. Click that. That takes you to a video that somebody else produced that talks about colors in movies. It's quite interesting, quite fascinating. You might want to check it out if you're into that. If you want to learn more about colors, that's probably a place I'd start. Or you could watch my color video as well about complementary color schemes. Actually, yeah, click that as well. Click just beneath that and you can watch my my color video. You've got a lot of watching to do. All right, but yeah, here's an example because I don't want to have people assume like, oh, I got to have color then because everything looks cool with color. Right? It's not always. Like I said, an aesthetically beautiful face, something traditional, something realistic, stick with natural colors for the lighting. Like every, beauty model photo shoot or whatever, they always use these natural colors that you find in the environment because it just feels comfortable to us. So make sure you're using what actually fits it. All right, brief moment on backgrounds. Even though this is a lighting tutorial, backgrounds are, I guess it more squarely fits in with composition, but since you're lighting your character, you're probably also trying to think about whether or not you should have a background. So I'll just bring it up now. Having no background and just having your model stand by itself, a bold move, I must say. You're bringing about all sorts of potential criticism because there's nothing else to look at except your model. It can feel focused because there's potentially nothing else to distract us, but it can also feel empty and sort of like half finished. So that's why I recommend using even anything, like some sort of subtle background just behind your character. It can make it feel like it's part of a complete scene, kind of like a character that's physically standing in front of a wall. It can sometimes be distracting if it's done poorly, like if you're using a cluttered background. Again, watch the composition tutorial to learn about that more. But yeah, if it's done poorly, it can be distracting. But generally, if it's done like in this example here of this, sort of slightly textured background, it can really help to complement the rest of the render. So, brief moment on the backgrounds there. And here's another example, like, again, talking about the story. You can also make the background help to tell your story. So you can see that this example on the right there, it's like a hero shot. It's like, look at me. Like, I am so strong. Like, that would be perfect for a superhero. This is sort of off topic for lighting, I guess. It's more composition, but just to bring it up anyway. All right, let's just go over a couple of quick tips just to finish off this technique part. Put light where it actually matters. Again, this is more towards composition, like your eyes are drawn to things of greater contrast. But yeah, that it applies equally to lighting. You shouldn't have even lighting over everything, although it is entirely tempting to do that because you've put all this effort into modeling every tiny centimeter of your model and you want to show it off just as it is, right? But doing so, it appears flat to the viewer. Like there's no specific area that is more important than another, when there should be something clear for the viewer to actually look at. If this person, Julian, had washed this whole thing in equal lighting all over, it would not be as impactful as it is right now. By throwing harsh lighting just on the face, we're really drawn to that and zoned into something in the image. So really important. And another example right here, you can see that the amount of lighting that's hitting the top of the head there is significantly more intense than the amount of lighting that's hitting the bottom there. So that's like having a single solid key light above her head with a really harsh fall off. So you can use fall off of lamps, fall off meaning like the energy as it decreases over space. You can use that for compositional effect in this sense. So this is it's interesting because generally, like, look at the amount of detail that this artist has put into modeling these shoes here. As artists, we often don't want to waste all the effort that we've put into it. Like most artists would be like, no, I've spent, a week just modeling the laces alone. I'm not going to just hide it in darkness. I'm going to show everything equally. But doing so, you create a less impactful image. So you often need to make little sacrifices, or, really, it's a battle with yourself. You're the only one that knows how much effort you've put into something. So you just need to, for the greater good, you need to let some parts fall into shadow to improve the overall image. And again, you don't need to light everything. You should not have light evenly over everything. You can use it, like I said, for compositional effect, but also for story. Like, look at this. How creepy is this render? If this character was just fully lit, it would not have the same effect as it does right now. Right now, this is just a little bit scary. Like, imagine walking home and just seeing this under a street lamp. A little bit frightening. Thank you for that, Pablo Munoz. You don't need to light everything. Don't feel you need to light everything. Put light where it actually matters. And feel free to let some stuff fall into darkness for the sake of the overall image, for the story. And then some tips that I couldn't really figure out where else to put it. But generally speaking, when you're lighting something, you want to start with one light at a time. They say in this book, quality of direction and quality of light. I don't know, it was kind of an okay book about photography lighting, but it said like a lot of it's a big mistake to think that you need to approach lighting with multiple lamps. Like a lot of photographers, they have the opposite feeling to us. Like they've invested hundreds of dollars into lamps, getting these really high quality lights, and they feel that they have to use them. So they approach a photo shoot with 5 lights on hand, and they're like, I got to put this light here, I got to put it somewhere. I'll just chuck it in the back. It's like, no. Start with one, and if you need another one, add another one. If you need another one after that, then only add that one. So just approach it from one at a time so that you don't go overboard. Just think. It just forces you to think about why you're adding something. And this is a small point, but light is generally seen as clarity. Like it's good to us to see light. Like, oh, I understand that thing. Darkness is a mystery, and it can sort of be suspenseful, as is shown right here. We're sort of uncomfortable with darkness. That's why having a character standing in the doorway with light behind them and we don't know who the character is, it's like, who is that? It's kind of mysterious, it's kind of scary, but it's better than just seeing the face often. So that's just a small point. And then for character specific, this is really interesting. You need to make sure that one of your lights is reflecting at least one of your eyes in your character is reflecting a catch light. So that is the light itself, that little tiny dot in the eye that's reflecting back. Without it, the eye appears dead, like that the person just feels dead and lifeless. And I didn't actually know this until literally a week ago when I read it in the book. And I was by coincidence, I was working on a model, and I was for some reason I'd lit it and there was no catch light in the eye. And it was actually a problem with the material. There was I think it wasn't set up properly, but it felt dead. It felt lifeless. And I was like, ooh. And so I worked on it. Like, how can I get the catch light in the eye? And I finally got it. And it just improved so much. And I was trying to think about why it is. And the only thing I can think of is maybe when you die, your eyes dry out very quickly. And so it becomes like a matte diffused surface. And so it doesn't reflect light. I think that's it. I'm happy to be proven wrong. If you know, let me know in the comments. But I'm pretty sure that would have to be the reason. But it's fascinating. So make sure you've got a reflection in your eye. Let me get a quick drink here. Otherwise, I'll be already losing my voice a little. And then the final point is shadows under the eyes. They look dark and mysterious. You should avoid it completely unless you're doing it intentionally. So I learned this actually the hard way. I paid to get my photos taken by a professional photographer. He had like this whole studio set up, crazy stuff, like seemed like a guy that knew what he was doing. And I got the photos back and I was like, it seems odd, but all right. And I posted it on Twitter and some guy's like, oh man, whoever took those photos doesn't know what they're doing. You've got harsh shadows under your eyes. That is a bad mistake. And yeah, I learned later on reading some books that is a big no-no. If you're lighting a character for beauty, you never ever want to have any shadows underneath the eyebrows. It just is wrong. Again, this is why soft lighting really helps, because you often don't get these harsh shadows. But yeah, like, so, and this is a tip for you, by the way. If you're out with friends and you got, it's a night on the town with the boys, with the fellas, and you're all standing together with your beers, and you've got, just light on hand, like, tell everybody, like, when you're taking a photo, tell them, like, can you just look at that light up there on the bar, the pub ceiling? Everybody take a look at that light. Look at the light, take the photo. You'll be amazed at how much better the photo looks, because everybody's looking at the light. The light is now hitting their eyes. There's no shadows under the eyebrows. Everybody feels alive, and it just looks so much better. So a little tip for you. But yeah, for characters, make sure you've always got light in the eye socket, unless you're deliberately trying to make them look mysterious, dark, moody, whatever. So a summary of everything we've mentioned so far: figure out your story first. Short lighting makes things three-dimensional, slimmer. Broad lighting makes things feel thicker. Rim lights is good for separating things from the background. Light from above, unless you're trying to make things deliberately scary or bizarre. Soft light, use it to show form and gesture. Harsh light, use it to show detail. I'm launching Polygon soon, a texture website, and we're doing a whole bunch of renders, and we are pretty much exclusively using harsh light to bring out the detail in the textures. It's crazy. Colored lights, use it for interest and surrealism. Use traditional lights for things that are natural, realistic, traditional. Backgrounds are helpful for making the feel complete. Just make sure you don't overdo it. Put lights where it matters and don't fear the shadows. And finally, one last thing to note, reflective materials, just a small thing here. Reflective materials behave entirely different to non-reflective materials. Things like cars, the same principles, everything we've just talked about still applies, but it's the reflections, not the actual light that's hitting the subject. Because where you're actually seeing a light on a reflective object is in the reflection. So it just means that instead of having the light over your shoulder, like in this case, looking at this car, the light wouldn't be coming from behind the car, from behind the camera. The lights pretty much are all coming from behind the car because it has to bounce off the car into the lens. So, but the same things still apply. If you had a light source which was, say, reflecting into this bonnet here, your eyes would be drawn to that bonnet there because it's the brightest thing in the scene. So, same sort of thing, and they've used smooth lighting across it to show the gesture, not the harsh detail. So, still all applies, just wanted to bring up reflective materials. All right, let's do a live demonstration. So, I'm going to open up Blender right now and do a demonstration on how I would light something. But, short little PS here. Do you have a lighting tip of your own? If so, love it if you could share it in the comments. So maybe you've learned something in photography, or maybe in your years of doing 3D rendering, a little tip like, oh, if you're lighting this sort of thing, maybe put a light over here, or, something like that. Like, it'd be cool to know, like, help each other out, make this interactive. You guys can just post it in the comments. I'd love to read it. Maybe learn a couple of things. Everybody can learn. We'll all learn at the same time. So that'll be fun. All right. Let's go ahead, do a live demo. All right, so we're in Blender right now, and we have a stock standard, well, actually, it's not stock standard. This is a wonderful model by Maria Panaflova. I think I pronounced the name wrong. But it's a wonderful character, and I thought it'd be great to demonstrate some lighting. So let's say you finish this, and you're like, yeah, finished it. Now, what am I going to do? So let's say you didn't at the start figure out, all these questions, the point of the render, the story, that kind of thing. You finished it. Now you just want to show it off the best way possible. So yeah, this is where you can sort of get into some experimentation. So I like to start with just throwing some ideas out onto the page, because you often really don't know what the best lighting setup will look like until you actually physically see it. So this is what you can do. I'm going to show you first the long method, and then I'm going to show you the method that I prefer. Some of you watching maybe can already clue into what I'm about to show you. But anyways, so this is generally what you would normally do when you're trying to light something. You add a light like this, you jump into, let me just move this over. Whoa. My cursor was flickering. Oh, it's back. Okay. So, you add a light like this and you go like, oh, okay, so the light from the side looks like that. How does it look from the front? So he sort of looks like that. It's not so great. Maybe I'll put one in the background as well. What color? Let's try a green color, and then, you play around with the lights and it just takes forever. And worst of all is that you second guess yourself. Like, you're like, I don't want to try a pink light because why would pink work? And it's kind of like you don't want to try something because you're fearful that it's not going to work. Then you have to, let's say you got this one. Then it's like, okay, let's try a blue one. So you got to put these ones on its own layer. Just save it, add another light, make it blue, blah, 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 blah. Now the trouble, it's time consuming, and it takes it out of you. And you often give up way too early when the real lighting setup is out there and the one that's going to make it look great. You just have to do a lot more testing in order to find it. So what we did at Blender Guru is we created this, the Pro Lighting Studio add-on. So it is a paid add-on, but I really do believe that it will improve your workflow. You can click this link here to purchase it if you don't already have it, but otherwise I'll just demonstrate with it. So the way it works is you select whatever it is that you want to light. In this case, I just selected the coat here. That'll do. And I might position. So this is the subject. This becomes like what's actually going to be lit. So the face is the most important part. Don't really care about the legs, but whatever. There we go. So that's now become the point at which it's going to be lit. And then what it does is it automatically places these lights around it for you, just briefly showing you what the add-on does. So then when you switch to another lighting setup, these lamps just automatically switch out, and they just change to a completely different position, different amounts, different colors, different values. So it's all automatic. I'll just make sure that the rotation is set to the camera the way it should be. There we go. So the whole point of this is that it allows you to very quickly cycle through like this. You can go like gallery view by clicking this. There's lighting for like objects. I won't do the whole sales pitch now. You can watch a video on that. There's lighting suited for cars, but the ones we're interested in are the character setups. So you can browse through the gallery just like this and go like, oh, this one looks cool. But it's honestly, it's just way better to just scroll through, like cycle, because then you can actually physically see it on your model and see what actually works and what doesn't work. And best of all is you can actually also narrow down to what sort of style you're specifically looking for. So this is a sci-fi character, right? So we should be getting away with some really colorful looking lighting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to narrow this down so that I'm not going to have any traditional. I'm going to have emotional. Let's try cinematic, experimental, and creative style lighting. Signature and traditional is more for like photography, realistic sort of stuff. But these are the fun ones. I like these ones. So I'll just start here. These are some like cinematic ones based off movies. We had to name them things that might not get us sued, I guess. But we had some fun with the names. You can sort of guess what sort of movies they're from. But anyways, so I'm just going to scroll through it. This one looks pretty good. Tyler Burden. No idea what movie that's from. So that first one looked okay. So I'm just scrolling through it. This one looks nice, night scroller, and I like it that like this is sort of like street lamp lighting with some sort of like green, sort of urban, sort of off, a little bit discomforting. That looks cool. I like that one. Only Ton Forgives. What movie could that be? Some of you might be able to guess them, some not. But anyways, what do you see? This one. Okay, so this one's The Matrix. This one's kind of cool. This one's got sort of a like there's shadows over the eyes there, so it's quite a little unnatural, but the beanie's sort of covering it anyway, so it does actually kind of work. Green is a little bit off-putting though. I might want to go for something a little bit more likable. This one's sort of like suitable for an angry or antagonist sort of character. Happiness. This one's sort of moody. fear. These are just basic emotions. Lust, I don't think we'd use something that bold. But you know what? I think that one's not bad. Okay, so what I would do is I'd find one that I actually liked, which I think was this one, Only Ton Forgives. And currently the rotation is locked to the camera, so that, you know, basically if you have the camera here and you rotate the camera, the lights actually physically rotate with it. But what I like to do is to actually unparent that, so to turn that off by hitting that. And then what you can do is use this rotation value like that. So before it was set so that the pink was coming from there, but I actually want to make it blue as the key light and just make the pink as sort of like a highlight, like a complementary highlight on that side. So this is a blue, like it's like sci-fi is an unnatural artificial color. So it's a stylized, something that really suits this character because they're urban, they're dressed in, this character is actually called cyberpunk fashion. So it's very suitable. So that looks really nice. What's this error? Remove other lights. I wasn't aware I had other lights, but there we go. They're all removed now. Okay, so that's pretty cool for lighting. If I wanted to, you could also, you could say that, you know, this sort of, maybe the front side here, this is where you want that smooth, soft lighting. So let's have a look at the actual size of these lamps here. So they're quite low at the moment, so these front ones are producing quite sharp lighting. So I might set these to a smoother amount, and that will also create smoother shadows across the body as well. So you can see the sort of fall off there becomes smoother. You don't get some as harsh a sort of look in the shadows there. Just makes the light source feel like it's bigger. And then these ones over here, like from this pink light, these are quite big. So I might make these small so that they produce sharper looking shadows. Like let's try like 0.5. Actually, I think that's probably even too big. Let's try 0.1. So yeah, just trying to get the detail on the other side there. So again, you know, the experimentation phase was to find some interesting ideas that work, but you use that based on all the stuff that we talked about before, why to use colors, when to change the lights to make them smooth versus harsh. So it all sort of plays into that. So we just use this add-on here to find just an ideal lighting setup to get us started, and then you play around with it, and that's when you start adding all the stuff that we've mentioned, the stuff that is important for lighting. Okay, so that I'm actually quite happy with that. That's great. Let's go ahead now and quickly set up a scene for it very quickly. So we've added this floor function, so it automatically just places a floor. It adds it directly underneath the subject box, which generally would be the feet, but in this case I just have to move it manually. And the thing I like about this is that it's got this checkbox, fade edges. So normally, like, see that background there? Like, that's so common. I hate it. It's like you finish a character and you want to have them, you want to have shadows on the ground. Like, they have to be standing on something. But then you've got this ugly line in the background there. And you're usually too tired and exhausted from doing everything to get rid of it. So you try and like fiddle with the lighting to tweak it or whatever. So we added this fade edges button. And it just applies like an alpha mask to the plane so that it fades it, so it just basically blends into the background. Really love it. You could also flip it out if you wanted to make it like a backdrop, like this sort of curved sort of thing there, but we'll just make it a circle. That's fine. And you can change the material here to anything like a road. A road might actually make sense for this. Standing in the middle of a road is a little odd. Burnouts, that's generally useful for characters. Maybe metal. Sci-fi-ish. Don't mind if I do. But I actually, honestly, my favorite one is clay. It's a nice thing. It's got some reflection in it, and I just like it. If we had something which was a, reflective object, we don't in this example, obviously. But let's say we did. We had a sphere here, and it had a very basic, glossy shader to it, set to smooth. What you could do, of course, is just add a very quick reflection map to it. And you just do that by going to the reflections and checking that. And then again, you've got the same thing. So we've got some real world environments you could pick, like, city streets or clouds or skies or whatever, and then as well as some like abstract studio light setups, which are a lot of fun to play with. But in this case, I don't think it actually makes any difference to our character here. You can use it to affect your lighting if you turn it up, but in this case, we don't really need it. So I'm just going to turn it off, turn off the reflections, and let's just stick to the backdrop. Do the backdrop. Ooh, let's get into that. So you've got presets here if you just want to cut to the chase and just focus on what actually matters. You know, just choosing some like tried and true methods that sort of work well. Or you can tweak it yourself. And this is honestly, I have fun just tweaking stuff by myself. So I want to have a nice rounded, I don't know, I'll play with it. Let's see if we can come up with something interesting. So the way this works is you choose a color here. Let's give it like a blue-ish color. Set a nice texture overlay on it. Something like that. It's a little bit too funky, a little surreal. I want to make it feel at least sort of slightly rooted in reality. That's kind of suitable, like a grid, a sci-fi grid in the background. That lighting is a little bit too intense. Just dial it back slightly. And you can turn down the amount of, whoops, that was not what I wanted to do. Turn down the value, and that'll just basically reduce its impact. You could also use this mask value here. I know this is all turning into a big sales pitch, but I'm just sort of showing. Essentially, I want to make it clear sort of what why we would use this this paid add-on for this sort of step here, because it allows you to just work creatively. Otherwise, we'd be jumping into the world nodes and spending upwards of an hour fiddling with this stuff, trying to fix it ourselves. But anyways, we could play with this stuff for ages. But you get the idea. It's essentially like, what sort of story do you want to tell for this? This one looks kind of cool. I think I actually like that. Yeah, buddy. Now I'm liking it. Yeah, I'll turn down the saturation of that color slightly, just so it's not quite as overpowering as the rest of it. There we go. So it's subtle. It's like we've got a character standing out in a scene. I could make the floor a little bit smaller, just so it's taking up less visual space. And, you know, there's maybe some snow falling in the background or some particles or something like that. And it's having that sort of effect. We've made sure that our lighting is suitable. We got soft lighting on the front, harsh lighting on the back. We've chosen some colors which look interesting and surreal, so it's sort of sci-fi. We've got the light that's hitting the eyeballs, very important. I don't think we have a catch light because the material's not set for it, but it is looking nice. So that is sort of how you would go about lighting a character. We've come to the end of it. I hope that was at least somewhat useful. Essentially, it's all about that story and then figuring out the do's and don'ts of lighting and when to use each. Have fun, experiment with it, and then adjust your lighting to suit so that you hit those requirements. I hope that was helpful. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. Please like this video on YouTube. And that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching, and if you know somebody who could maybe benefit from this, why not share it with a friend? Send it to them on Facebook or something.